Hello travelers, and welcome back to another installment of the Traveler's Guide to Lindwurm. In this episode we will be looking at movement, both the basic simple action as well as other forms of movement that you can impose on your units and on enemy units. We won't be looking at assault and charge today. That will be covered in another video, but with that, let's jump in and get a bit of a roadmap about what we're going to be talking about. So the plan of attack. First, we'll be looking at the move simple action, what I consider the most important action in the game, because it's how you move around and how you score points, because that's how you usually get to the ways you score. So we'll look at the basics of how you actually perform the move simple action, and then I'll give you some things to keep in mind, as well as some useful tactics, starting out, or even just looking on ways you can improve your play. Then we'll move on to look at the other forms of movement. In this case, I'm referring to shove, attract, place, and displace. But before we jump in, I'll just quickly remind you that if you do enjoy this video and you're enjoying other videos on the channel, please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the channel. Helps me know that you're watching and helps other people find out about the channel. If you were interested in supporting the channel financially, there are two options. There is a link to a Buy Me a Coffee in the description below. And now there is also the option to join the channel as a member, either at the intact or the marked levels. If you have any suggestions for videos or any thoughts on the videos, please make sure to comment below. Suggestions for other videos, including any specific entries of the Architect's Forge people are interested in, I will take into consideration. And those that choose to support the channel financially, theirs will get bumped up in the queue just as a thank you for the support. But with that, let's jump into looking at the move simple action. So I say it's the most important action in the game because it's how you move around, and anyone that's played games or played some Warcrow even knows that usually that's how you get to the points you need to be on to score and win the game. It is the main simple action that a unit can perform, and it is the only simple action that you can use twice in one activation. So that means, unlike other simple actions, for example, attack, you can choose to use the move action for both of your units' two actions in their activation, allowing your unit to both move and then move again. Of note, a move action cannot be used to engage an enemy unit, so that means you cannot enter base-to-base contact using the move action. So how do you actually perform it? Step 1, you place one end of the movement tool touching the base of your unit leader. Step 2, you place your unit leader so that any part of their base is touching the other end of the movement tool, or less. You do not need to move the full distance on the movement tool. Step 3, repeat steps 1 and 2 using your second move value. Then at the end, finally, once you've performed both moves, and remembering you don't need to move the full distance, you will replace the remaining models of your unit into unit coherency, so that is within 2 strides of each other. Now, because words aren't always the best way to learn, I have a short little video that we'll go through that kind of shows what I just said. So on screen, we have a unit of intact, and they have a movement of 3-2. So let's see what a move looks like. We move the non-leader characters out of the way just so it's easier. We'll place him 3. And if we decided that this is where we ended our move, we'd end the other models within coherency. But we aren't going to actually end there, so we'll then put the measuring tool to be 2, and the leader will then move another 2 strides. And now at the end of that simple action, we do need to place all of the other intact in the unit into coherency, so within 2 strides of the leader. So that is really it. That is a move. You move 3, you move 2, because they have 3-2 move, and that's it. You don't need to move the full distance. It is important to recognize that is a single move action. Will get you both, in this case, the 3 and the 2. If you're coming from infinity, this can be confusing because in infinity, if a unit had movement 3-2, it would mean that they got to move 3 for their first simple action and 2 for their second simple action. That is not the case here. Also of note, it is in a straight line. You can't curve the movement tool to bend, for example, that 3 around the corner of impassable terrain. You essentially get around corners by moving 3 to, past the corner and then 2, around it. So that is that. So quickly, some things to remember. As I said, you do not need to move the full distance. You can use the movement values in either order. So in the case of the intact that have 3-2 movement, you can either move the 3 and then the 2, or you can move the 2 and then the 3. One thing to be careful about is shorthand movement. It is a good tool, but just be careful when doing it. And, I'd usually prefer moving things slow. When I mean shorthand movement, it's essentially saying, well, the size of a small base is 2 strides. If I move 3, and then place myself at the end of that movement 3, the front of my base will be 5 strides closer to wherever I'm going. If I then move 2, I'd be, another 4 strides closer. So essentially you can add your 2 movement values together, the 3 and the 2, add 4 for the 2 base places, and say, okay, the front of me can be 9 strides closer to, the objective I'm trying to get to, for example. In the case of large models, it would be a +8 because a large base is 4 strides instead of 2. This can be very handy for measuring and quickly checking to see if a unit can move to get into range of an objective to contest it. Let's say there's an objective your opponent is securing, you have a unit that is more conquest. You want to check to quickly see if they can make it there. There's pre-measuring allowed in Warcrow, so you can quickly just check and see, okay, if I move, if I move twice, I move 9, I move another 9, that's 18. If I move 18, will my leader be on that objective? It is good for shorthand, but when you're actually doing a lot of movement, especially when you're not moving in a straight line, I do think it is better to skip the shorthand and just do the movement properly. The ability to move in this, the 2 or first or the 3 first can be very handy for maximizing movement, especially around terrain that is impassable or units that you can't move through, or if you can't end the half of the movement on top of. So let's say a 3 will land you in the middle of an allied model that you could otherwise move through, but you can't end there because you're on top of them. So instead, what you might want to do is move the 2 to end right, up to them, and then move the 3 to go past. So things like that can just optimize the distance that you're traveling. And since movement is the main way to get around the board, get onto objectives and score them, any ways you can optimize movement will always be a good thing. Now, since we've now gone through the move simple action, we'll move on to other forms of movement. So these are 4 different ways that usually appear in abilities, sometimes in switches. They allow you to either move your units or move your opponent's units. So those are shove, attract, place, and displace. And we'll go through them one at a time. And after I explain them, verbally, then we'll show a little bit of a video for each of them. So first, let's look at shove. So shove will usually be written as shove and then in brackets, 3, 5, whatever it is. And this is usually in the rules referred to as brackets X. And what shove lets you do is you distance the target. So the target must distance itself from your unit, so the unit using the shove, by X strides, by this number of strides listed beside the shove. So that's it's essentially getting pushed away from you or shoved away from you. Now, the direction of the shove is a line that connects the center of your leader's base, so the leader of your unit, to the center of the target unit's base. So essentially, draw an imaginary line between the center of both of the leader's bases, and then push the enemy, continue that line along, away from your unit, and push the target unit along that line. This can cause a unit to leave combat. So if a unit is engaged and you shove them away, then they will be pushed out of combat without provoking an attack of opportunity. Other things to note, the unit will stop the shove if it collides with another unit or impassable terrain. And this shove can be used to cause a unit to enter into combat. So let's say you target an enemy unit and shove them backwards 5, and that shove pushes them into one of your other units. Well, now that unit you just shoved is engaged in combat with that new unit. So let's see what that looks like on the table. Shove is fairly rare, but one example of it is with the Contender, the nice lady with the whip there from the Northern Tribes. She has an ability called Defiant Leader, and the second half of that ability causes the enemy to make a willpower test. If they do not succeed with 2 successes, then you can either shove them 5, so shove at 5, or attract at 5. So here we're going to look at the shove. So in this case, the Contender targets the Mount Haven Raiders that are there with the shove, and they failed their willpower test. The leader, which is the bottom of the 2 raiders in this case, we'll see how we measure out the shove. So we place the movement tool of the 5 in line so that the center of the leader and the Contender makes that line. We place, or we essentially slide it, but essentially you place it directly 5 strides away from where it started, and then you'll place the remaining model in the unit. So that's it. That is how a shove is performed. The raiders are now 5 strides further away from the Contender. Now, looking at what happens if they bump into a piece of impassable terrain, or in this case, another unit, that Olga, that is back where they're going to be shoved to. Again, the raiders, you place the 5, you slide them directly away along that line, and they run into Olga, causing them to stop when they hit her base. So they don't move the whole 5, they move essentially as far as they can before they hit that other troop or the impassable terrain. If this was something just like a wall, which is not impassable, they would just slide through the wall, or like a fence or something like that. But that is shove. It's fairly straightforward. And we'll look at kind of the partner to it, which is attract. And attract works very similarly to shove, except instead of being pushed away from your unit, the target is forced to approach your unit, get pulled towards you. So again, it's going to be the number of strides equal to whatever is listed in the ability in the parentheses. And again, you're going to be drawing that same line between the center of your leader's base and the center of the target's base, and they're going to slide towards you along that line. Just like shove, this can cause you to leave, cause the unit to leave combat and will not provoke an attack of opportunity. It will also stop if it collides with another unit or impassable terrain, and it can be used to cause a unit to enter into combat. So once again, we will be looking at the Contender and the same ability to look at that the attract this time. So again, the raiders in this scenario have failed their willpower test, and they're going to be, in this case, attracted 5. So there will be that same line drawn between the center of the Contender and the raiders leader. We'll place down that 5 stride, and they will slide directly along it towards the Contender, stopping early because they come in contact with another unit, in this case the Contender themselves, and then we'll place the other raider, engage with them. And that's it. It's very similar to shove, except they're pulled towards. One handy thing here, for example, is let's say the Contender wanted to get into combat with these raiders and attack them, but was too far away to assault or charge. She could have used her first simple action to get into the position that we saw her in at the beginning of the video, and then use this command ability to pull the raiders in, and she still has a second simple action, so then she'd be able to attack them even though she wasn't able to use one of the normal methods of charging or assaulting in to get an attack. So different ways, things like this should be looked out for to get engagement and maybe pull off an extra attack without being able to use the traditional ways of doing so. Moving along, we'll get into place. So placing, will be indicated by, again, an X or a number. It'll say place 3, for example. And essentially that is a point a certain distance away from your troop leader where you're going to be placing the target. Now, it's important to note the owner of the target will place the unit's troop leader on that point and then place the rest of the unit. It's important to note that if the owner of the skill, so for example, let's say unit A has a skill that gets to place a target. If it says place target 2, that distance is measured from the owner of the skill, not the target being placed. So if it says place to ally within 12 strides, you will place the target unit, not 2 from its current position, but 2 from the unit using the place ability. It's something that people often mix up, and it can be a bit confusing when you're first getting into it. Just like the other shove and attract that we've talked about, this can be used to have a unit leave combat without provoking an attack of opportunity, and can be used to cause a unit to enter into combat. And as I was saying, the placement is measured from the placing unit, not the unit being placed. This can be a bit confusing, and hopefully the video will kind of help explain it. For this example, we're going to be looking at Master Nephirim and the Audhura. Master Nephirim has an ability called the Call of the Weaver that allows her to place 5, an allied risen unit, within 15 strides. Now, as I was saying before, when it says place 5, an allied risen unit, this is Master Nephirim's ability. It does not mean, as we're going to see me start to do in the video, it does not mean you place the Audhura 5 from where it is. That's wrong. Instead, what it means is you will place the Audhura 5 from Master Nephirim, the unit using the ability. So as you could see, rather than going from the left side of the screen to about halfway through the screen, this allowed the Audhura to be placed from the left side of the screen to the far right of the screen. So remembering this can be very important and can really change essentially how far a model is being placed. In the case of this ability, right, Master Nephirim could be targeting at Audhura 15 strides to the left of them, and then place them 5 strides to the right of them, causing that Audhura to, cover over 20 strides of distance. Whereas if you misinterpreted it and thought you just placed the Audhura 5 from its starting point, that would only be 5 strides instead of 20 plus strides. So it's important to remember that that is how place works. If an ability allows the unit itself to place, it's usually more straightforward. You'll just pick up your unit that is placing itself and place it within, however far of where it started based on the ability. But that is place. We'll move on to the final, which is displace. I know some people have hard time keeping track of place versus displace. One handy way I like to remember it is placing is, you pick up a cup of water. If you're placing a cup of water, you're just kind of picking up, putting it down wherever you want to put it down. Whereas if you're displacing something, you think of, the displacement of water, right? It's, you're pushing something out of the way. So, and displace kind of works like that. It's very similar to shove. It is a straight movement of X, so X strides, whatever distance is listed in the displace, in the direction indicated. Usually for displace, there isn't necessarily a direction indicated, so you can displace in any direction, but there may be a case where it says displace, away, or displace, whatever. If it lists a direction, do the direction. Most of the time displaced won't have a direction. Essentially, it's a slide in a direction equal to the X strides. It's important to recognize displace is not affected by terrain, so that means you can displace through rugged terrain without being stopped. It will, however, be stopped by impassable terrain, and of course, if you run into enemies or allies, if you run into models. It can be used to leave combat without provoking an attack of opportunity. It will, as I said, stop if you collide with a unit or impassable terrain, and can be used to enter into combat. So let's see Displace. And again, we'll go back to looking at Master Nephrim and her Audhura. Master Nephrim has another ability on her card, this time her spell, and it allows all risen units within 12 strides to displace their first move value. In the case of the Audhura, the first move value is 3. So in this case, we're going to see the Audhura, and they're going to displace 3. So in this case, the Audhura wants to be moving towards, being in front of Master Nephrim. So we'll just have them slide along the 3 to the end there. So they have now displaced themselves 3, and it is as simple as that. Now let's say that there was a low wall in the way. This is not impassable terrain. We're just treating this as some cover. In that case, if the Audhura wants to displace just like before, place the 3. It's a bit harder when you can't just put it flat, but they just slide across, not being blocked or stopped by that terrain at all. However, if that wall, let's say, was a higher wall, or you chose that you were playing it as impassable, then the Audhura would have stopped when they first collided with it. But that is it for, the other types of movement. And really, we'll just get into a bit of a summing up and final thoughts. It's important to remember that movement is the most powerful tool to master in Warcrow, as is the case in most war games. Moving around the board, being where you want to be to score, to threaten opponents is very important. And the more practice you get at, being in control of your movement as well as your opponent's positioning, will really help you succeed and win games. Positioning your units is how you're going to secure objectives and score points. It also, can help you position to get certain feats, but it is, primarily a scenario thing, but also feats require you to move around. You can also, as I was saying, use the different tools like shoving and attracting, or placing enemies to position opponents' units, which will also help you secure objectives and can help you break up support abilities where certain enemy units might want to be close to each other to get synergies or to protect each other. So a good example of this is the puppeteer in Scions likes being near husks because the puppeteer can pass wounds off onto the husks. If you were to pull the puppeteer out of range of their husks and then attack her, well, now she's not getting that ability. Don't forget that all movement in Warcrow is measured from front to back. So you essentially, instead of being like Infinity where you'd put, a measuring at the front of your model, and then if you're moving 3, the front of the model would be 3 closer. Warcrow doesn't work that way. If you're measuring a distance of 3, you put that at the front of your model, and then you can place the back of the model. So it's front to back. Don't forget it, because otherwise you will be robbing yourself of that extra 2 strides, or 4 strides in the case of large models. So that is all there is to say at this point about movement. I hope this is a helpful introduction to movement and the different movement abilities. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is there anything I missed? Are there any particularly important things you think should be targeted? Or do you have any questions? Please let me know in the comments below. And until next time, may the dice be ever in your favor.